Thank you everyone for joining us here today at Rosham's Regeneration Summit for Israel, the Impact Nation. What we're doing in this segment is exploring how Israel can go from being known as the startup nation to also expanding into becoming the impact startup nation and implementing best practices, standards, policies, impact management practices into the way that impact startups and overall technology startups are developed in Israel. We're here today with a pioneer in the impact investing space, Lee from the Global Impact Tech Alliance. She's going to introduce us to her work, her background, what she's doing in Israel right now, and what she sees as being the future of impact tech in Israel.
My background in this field is generally since 2008. So I've been in the impact investing world for quite a long time. My background before that, I think, is also relevant. I grew up in Israel, very much passionate about social, environmental issues and political issues, so very much an activist. And as I grew a little bit older, I became a little discouraged about the ability of social movements and environmental movements specifically. I've always been passionate about those issues, to actually make a difference. And I entered the financial world, seeing that, money does make the world go round. And I left, I put my values on the side and said, okay, I'll go into finance. And for a few years, I indeed went into investment banking and traditional finance. Found out I understand it well, and I enjoy the work, but my soul was feeling something that was missing. And so I left Israel around 2005 to really look for different opportunities and where we can do this double bottom line activity. Found myself in Europe and then in the US, doing a graduate program in New York, where I found this world of impact investing. And I joined a fund called E&Co, which is one of the pioneer renewable energy in developing countries impact fund. So we invested in clean energy solutions and entrepreneurs and projects for really for products that are dedicated to populations that are off grid around the developing world. People are not connected to electricity or are cooking on traditional ways, so burning firewood. And so we had the opportunity to really invest in entrepreneurs that are bringing in new products that are clean. And with this fund, I spent some time both in the US and then in Amsterdam, and then I moved to Africa to really help manage the African portfolio of our fund. And I finally got to see what it means really for entrepreneurs to maximize both the social or environmental change that they're doing and the financial change, and understand that the gap that I was brought up on, I was told that there's a huge gap between financial returns or making money and doing good, and that we have to choose. And there's a line between, and you can't do both. And through my journey with the impact investing world, I realized, first of all, you can do both. And after a while, it seems that we really have to do both. So there's no turning back from entering this space. I spent a few years living in Africa, in different areas, from the beginning in West Africa and then in East Africa, and really studied amazing entrepreneurs creating these wonderful businesses that are truly addressing a social and environmental issue and truly making money. And as I entered the space and I understood the potential, I started looking more and more back home to Israel, which is, if any of you guys haven't been to Israel, it is an incredible dynamic society. And one of the most unique things there is, well, here, because that's where I am right now, is the ecosystem around technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So of all my years living around Europe and the US, I probably met a dozen entrepreneurs, so friends of mine who decided to leave their jobs and stop being employees and set up a new company. And so it's quite rare around the world. In Israel, I would say.
Thank you so much, Lee, for that insight, which brings me to my next question. I just need to know, how can we collaborate between South Africa and Israel? For example, to facilitate impact measurement and management in South Africa?
So it's a great question, and it's a very large question. I can tell you when I entered the field in 2008, the sector of impact investing was very fragmented, and everyone all around the world was kind of doing their own thing. And then a group called the GIN, the Global Impact Investing Network, was founded to try to collect everyone and start making sense of what should we measure, how we should measure. And I think that is one of the key issues here of working together with other people in your sector. And now there are tens of thousands of people around the world just figuring out this whole idea of measurement and what we measure. Today, I think the most accepted methodology or framework for thinking are the SDGs. So whoever doesn't know, the SDGs are the 17 goals of sustainable development goals that the UN has set up in 2015 that we want to achieve as humanity by 2030. And they're really a mapping of all the challenges that we face as a species around the world, around the cultures, different geographies. We all face all of these challenges. And what's interesting about the SDGs, they're not just goals. Behind them are 17 indicators. Behind the 17 goals, there are indicators, actually 232 indicators that are quantitative indicators that give us a sense that we reached that goal. So for instance, if we're talking about gender equality, that is a complex social issue that is systemic, and we can analyze it from many, many different ways. And I won't claim to say, we can solve it, but the quantitative indicators such as inequality on wages or inequality regarding violence or abuse, those indicate the larger problems. And so for each one of the problems that we could look at, we can find these indicators that help us see. They're quantitative, they don't tell the whole story, but together as a bundle, they help us know that the challenge is slowly being addressed. And so the real art of impact measurement is around identifying the right indicators. And remember, they're indicators, they just indicate that show us that we are addressing the challenge properly, the problem. And really each project, each product, each service that we are creating that are trying to deal with the SDGs should be touching one of these indicators in a measurable way. So I think connecting to the rest of the discussion here on the panel about gender equality, we can see that if someone is creating a tool or a service or a product that makes the inequality in wages very clearly in a quantifiable way smaller, then they're helping to address the challenge. And so the idea really is understanding what exactly I'm trying to do with my product, my service, my financial solution, and then trying to see which indicator I can honestly say, with all the analytical tools I have in the world, I'm influencing that indicator, I'm making it better. And so these tools help us make it better. Of course, there are many frameworks. One very important framework that is being used today is the IMP, the Impact Measurement Project, which is, again, it's a way to look at this question of how do I know that I'm being effective? How do I know that I'm making an impact? And it just gives us a larger framework of understanding what we want to achieve and how this intervention is affecting the different actors, different stakeholders, and also making sure that we're paying attention to unintended consequences, because we all know that good intentions sometimes can lead to bad consequences. And so the IMP gives us a framework also to analyze the risks, the potential bad consequences that could have. Even if I meant to do the best thing in the world, I may be doing something that is hurting some of the stakeholders. So I think these frameworks, and what I would really recommend to anyone entering the field is to, first of all, learn the existing and the traditional frameworks, and it could be the IMP, it could be a B Corp, it could be just the SDG as it is, and slowly learning that, connecting to different practitioners in your field that share that same kind of issue. If you're we started with gender inequality. We can continue that. There are global networks, global initiatives, local initiatives of people who already know what to measure, how to measure. So my biggest advice is don't invent the wheel on your own. If you're just entering, learn from your fellow practitioners, because a lot of things have been tried and failed, and it would be a shame to just fail just because we didn't know about these failures. And really, with the urgency of really dealing with the problems today, we don't have the time or the resources to keep repeating the mistakes. Let's learn from each other. So that would be my number one.
So Lee, you mentioned that you were in Africa for a few years. I just need to know your ideas around how can Israel technology make a difference for Africa? How do we work together?
So Matavo, that is an amazing question. And we can speak about that for hours. We have literally arranged whole conferences around that issue. But I can give you my 2 cents and maybe a little of kind of what I've learned around the last few years. So, you know, of course, Israel is tiny and Africa is a continent with, you know, 54, 55 countries with different needs, with different issues, with different climates. So it's a very, very large question. What I would want to say though, is that the greatest way I think for collaboration, it's not only between Israel and the African continent, but in general for collaboration, is really understanding what are the key assets and values that each side brings with them. And that also entails understanding what are the key assets that you don't have and what you're not good at, and to be very honest and clear about what we can bring to the table and what we can't bring to the table. So I think with Israel's side, what Israel can bring to the table is really the early stage innovation side, the looking at a problem and thinking, okay, let's solve it like that. Oh, that doesn't work, let's solve it like this. And just continue thinking on your feet and very quickly going to a solution-based kind of approach. And that's amazing. I think that is really unique in this region and is really something we can learn from. And then the other thing that is very unique in Israel is this ecosystem that allows entrepreneurs to step out of their employed world and test and try and experiment and create a new idea. And there's funding and there's support and there's knowledge and there's accelerators to help entrepreneurs really build a great idea. Those are the key assets. And I think the way I've seen proper collaboration being done between Israeli organizations or companies and different kind of African actors looking to address development is trying to kind of sit on that early stage innovation and connect it with the challenges in the continent through a very humble way, and bringing in a lot of the key stakeholders in the community that we see there. So work with local communities, local entrepreneurs. African entrepreneurs are critical for these kind of cooperations to really succeed. I can give an example of a project I've been working on in the last few years. There is a center in the Israeli desert called the Eilat Eilot Renewable Energy Center. And they have a place there where they test different technologies for renewable generation. And they also have a little center for off-grid solutions that Israeli technologies have set up. These ideas of solar home systems or water pumps, solar water pumps that can work and maybe create irrigation for smallholder farmers, and different kind of solutions that would be amazing for off-grid populations and communities in the African continent. But how do we get them from a little farm, a little demonstration center in the middle of the desert in Israel to the actual users on the ground? And so I've been working with this organization for a while, and what we did is, first of all, travel a few times to different countries in the continent to see the need. Because a lot of times here, people look at the problem as a purely technical problem and don't see it in the context. And we connected with different kind of organizations, global organizations supporting entrepreneurship for development programs, like TechnoServe, which is a global, it's an American or an NGO, but they work all around the developing world to help address global challenges through a business model. So through entrepreneurship and these kind of conscious capitalism approaches of how do we help address the problem with a product, but create a business model that really helps everyone. So we met a lot of these different agencies that this Israeli organization did not know, created a partnership with some of them. We found a local community. We ended up setting up a center in Kenya with a local cooperative, a dairy cooperative that brings together about 2,000 local farmers in the sector. And this local cooperative is an equal partner, absolutely equal partner. They're not the beneficiaries. They are the co-creators, they are the co-innovators. They know the problems and the challenges that the cooperative members deal with on their day-to-day. An Israeli tech entrepreneur can never solve a problem without really understanding what the problem is. And so this is an equal kind of partnership where the cooperative works together with this agency that brings together a bunch of tech entrepreneurs to help bring in the products, test the products, and then do adaptation. So there has to be like a feedback loop. It's not a one-off. Here, take the solution, goodbye. This is our initial solution. How are people using it? Does it work? Doesn't it work? Should we make adjustments? Should we make changes? And so you integrate this feedback loop and make sure that, again, everyone needs to be kind of humble in this situation to know that the needs are constantly changing and adapting, and bringing in the local entrepreneurs so they are the ones also with ownership over the success of adoption of the product. So if we're talking about, let's say, a solar home system, it's a product that is already quite prevalent around the developing world. You really need that local entrepreneur that cares about his community, that will start, or her community, and start selling the product and helping people afterwards adopting and using the product and making sure everyone's happy and making sure everyone's paying the price, the amount. And so that kind of co-creation is really essential, I think, to bring the technologies to the continent, and also to make sure that there is kind of a mechanism where new needs and challenges are being brought up to the Israeli ecosystem, and that slowly entrepreneurs are developing these solutions and then testing it back in the markets where they are relevant. So it's constant kind of conversation and co-creation and making the products better and more impactful. And of course, don't forget that the main thing here is having the appropriate funding for that. So this early stage of piloting and testing and making sure that the product is actually fitting the needs, that's not a very profitable stage. So we need like soft funding for that level, and then appropriate funding once, the product, if it's water, if it's energy, if it's food, whatever it is, we can make sure that they're growing and scaling up. For that, you need actual investment capital for the businesses, the local entrepreneurship businesses, to make that happen. And so there's a lot of kind of ecosystem approach, and a lot of different organizations that need to work together to make it happen. I don't think one person alone can do this successfully. This is the whole world. What I can tell you is, if you go, we can talk about this later and we can share resources, but there are a whole list of amazing Israeli technologies that are properly, even today, addressing water challenges, energy challenges, food challenges, education, health, all of them remote and kind of inclusive solutions that are targeting the base of the pyramid already today. So it's also about knowledge and bringing those technologies that already exist with amazing entrepreneurs, which we can connect you to the field, to the right people that can afterwards help commercialize and sell these solutions.
Hi there, guys. My name is Matabo247, all the way in South Africa. In this segment, we talk to Dana, who's going to talk to us about the ecosystem and the impact investing nation that we know as Israel. Dana, let's get straight into it. Can you just perhaps introduce yourself and also your career journey as to how it led to start Social Impact in Israel, and perhaps reach out about your current destination.
So thank you, Metabo, and thank you for the organizers of this great summit. I'm Dana Rubing. I come from a background of executive management positions in diverse sectors. I've worked in high-tech companies, in the finance sector, as well as the food and beverages industry, with roles such as global marketing, investor relations, corporate social responsibility, public relations, research, and strategy. And during my career, I felt a growing need and passion to harness my capabilities and my experience, 20 years of experience, to help startups and technology-based initiatives to develop solutions for social and environmental challenges. And this resulted in the birth of Social Impact Israel, which I founded, to help companies to deliver on this challenge. And in this career path that eventually led me to my current position as Director of Investor Relations at Pluristem, which is a biotech company. We develop cell therapies as treatments for unmet medical needs. One of the indications we are currently working on is potential treatment for severe ventilator-dependent COVID-19 patients. And by improving the well-being of patients globally, and by helping them to stay productive and to stay and to shorten hospitalization periods and ease the growing burden on the healthcare ecosystem, we actually can help and impact not only the society but also the economy.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that great introduction with the work you've done thus far. Do you want to perhaps just tell us about the projects and initiatives that you're currently involved with and are passionate about?
Okay, so one of the projects was to translate the UN Sustainable Development Goals, known as the SDGs, and adapt them to the Israeli market. This project was led by the Israeli Corporate Social Responsibility Institute. And I also co-funded a community called Waste Innovation Project. The idea was to bring together entrepreneurs and experts from the waste management sector to find together solutions and to create initiatives in order to tackle challenges in this sector. And in Pluristem, I also very active member of the ecological internal committee. What we are doing, we're going through different processes of daily working in the company, and we try to find solutions for different environmental issues. And I also volunteer as a co-director and ambassador at Startup Grind Tel Aviv, which is part of the global community of Startup Grind, operating in 600 cities worldwide. And this community, this network, what we're doing, we're bringing together entrepreneurs and investors, and the idea is to develop and to promote entrepreneurship and innovation. And for the past few years, I have been volunteered as head of impact development at the NGO Natan, International Humanitarian Aid Organization, which is active in regions that are affected by global warming, and help both climate change refugees and also refugees in conflict zones, such as the refugees in the camps in Serbia and Greece. And by doing all this together, all these initiatives where volunteer and all these initiatives where I can help with my knowledge and my experience, together with my day job at Pluristem, which is a company which is in its essence, it's a company that has an impact in the society. So in this way, I can live my values and I can do what I'm passionate about, and that's great.
That must be quite exciting, being able to earn a living while you make a difference in your community. Now, when I think of Israel, I think of technology and how it's an amazing place geographically. But I need to understand, in terms of impact investing, what is the state of impact in Israel and what's missing from the impact investing ecosystem as a whole in Israel?
The past few years, we saw more and more impact-related startups. According to a report that was published in the beginning of last year, there were around 2,500 impact-related startups, according that startups that were aligned to the SDGs, and around 1.6 billion raised by these type of startups. It's around 25% of all capital raised. But I think that COVID-19 is a new situation. People now better understand the possible impact, the possible scenarios of the global warming, and they understand how, we all understand how the future is going to look like. And another thing that we understand, that we should have more collaborations between countries, governments, and the different sectors, the private sector, the civil sector, as well as the public sector. And I think that we will see more and more initiatives, social and environmental initiatives from all of these sectors. And with regard to the second part of the question, what is missing in impact investing in Israel? So I think what is really missing is investments and funds for social businesses that are not based on technology. We have the startups ecosystem, we have the companies, we have the NGOs, but in the middle we have the business, the social businesses, and they don't get enough support in order to operate and to grow. And this is one of the problems. I think it's not only in Israel, but I would love to see more impact investing in this kind of initiatives as well.
Thank you for that answer. I guess what I want to get into now is to understand your community dynamics. How do you think the Israeli companies, stakeholders, investors, employees, and the community at large view the idea of impact investing?
So the past few months, we have seen positive developments in Israel. The Israel Securities Authority is pushing through a new initiative with the public companies regarding to the need to report on environmental, social, and governance, ESG aspects. As I've been working with investors for many years, and what I see today, working at Bluestem as the Director of Investor Relations, that you see more and more institutional investors, as well as family office and private investors, that they demand more information about the ESG aspects of the company. There are also several indexes that give scores to every traded company. And this is part of the information they look for in order to make the decision whether to invest in the company or not. And if we talk about the other stakeholders, if you take, for example, the employees, so we today see also a change in certain sectors. Employees are becoming today more demanding than ever towards the companies they're working for. They demand to have more transparency and to understand the positive and the negative impact of them following the activity of the company. And I think that in the coming years, we will see more and more the way the role of corporate social responsibility or ESG strategy, or whatever we can call it, but there will be a growing need for team or person inside these companies that is taking responsibility and is handling all these CSR and ESG issues, because this is where the world is going to. This is what I see in the coming few years.
That's so great to know. Let's now talk about my favorite topic when it comes to impact investing. Do you just want to, give me the state of impact measurement and management in Israel?
Yeah. So according to the same report I've already mentioned in one of my previous answers, the same report demonstrated that there are only 13% of the impact-related startup also used and actually tracked impact-related KPIs. I think that if we talk about companies that report on their CSR aspects, there are not too many of them, but the companies that do report about CSR, they use different tools and different directives, such as if they are traded, so it can be SASB or GRI or Global Compact, and even the SDGs. This enables them to better measure their impact. But I think that the most important point in this issue is that impact should not be used as a tool for PR and marketing. Big no. It should be as integrated part of the organizational strategy, the values of the company and its core business, and therefore as any other activity within the company, and any other as we measure ourselves, as we measure our marketing efforts, as we measure our finance department, and all other departments, we also should measure and monitor the impact. So this is the way it should be.
Just to get a bit more clarification, what do you see as being the most important part for impact investing as a portfolio management strategy to progress in Israel?
Okay, so forces may change the current situation. First one is the bottom up, the stakeholders that will be more demanding and will for information about the ESG aspects of companies. And the other force is top down, the regulation and obligation, not only from credit companies, all kinds of companies to report and to measure not only the positive impact, but also the negative impact. So I think once this changes and there will be more transparency, I believe we will see more impact investing and also more social and environmental initiatives.
Just before I let you go, Dana, I need to find out from you, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that you believe is necessary to drive forward an impact startup ecosystem in Israel and perhaps the world around?
Well, I'm not the first one to say that, but I agree with the state of mind that there is no reason why the startup nation will not be also impact nation. We have great minds, we have the great creativity, we have the flexibility, and we see it now in the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a book that was recently published called the Tikkun Olam, Israel versus COVID-19. The book presents 30 companies that are trying to tackle with the challenges of the pandemic. And among these startups, of course, it's the first time as well that we are developing potential treatment for severe COVID-19 patients that are ventilator dependent. So I truly believe that we have what it got, the innovation ecosystem in Israel has what it got in order to become an impact nation as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam Davidovich. I am a partner at Roshem Ventures in Israel and also a co-founder of the Roshem Foundation, which is our nonprofit arm. And as a nonprofit, the Roshem Foundation focuses on developing community investment programs. So that way the Roshem group of companies can directly fund community investment in the particular regions where the company is active. As part of that work, we have a completely separate board of directors. So we've got some great team members on our board who are actively involved with our work as well. Everything from organic, regenerative, and biodynamic agriculture on the ground here in Serbia. One of our board members has 27 years of experience in organic agriculture and is one of the pioneers of biodynamic and permaculture related projects here in Serbia. And another one of our board members is also involved with the Alchem organization, the Alternatives for Safe Chemicals. It is a Serbian nonprofit that works with Swedish, German nonprofits and companies on initiatives related to testing consumer products. They were actually the first to launch a initiative to test toys and children's retail products here in Serbia, and they found that many of the products had banned chemicals, phthalates, BPA, BPS, and a wide range of other toxins. And so we, in partnership with our board members, are launching initiatives here in Serbia to facilitate sustainable economic development and also create programs for local communities, so that where our company works and develops and invests in infrastructure and has for-profit programs, that our nonprofit can work with the local community directly within the local context and create programming for them that could allow, for example, rural community members and farmers to diversify their sources of income, or, for example, support young farmers in access to capital, access to funding and support for some of their smaller projects that might not be eligible for venture funding. As well, we also actively run programs to support education for the local communities, so that people here can gain new skills when it comes to information technology, programming, graphic design, and a wide range of other initiatives. So that's just a little bit of what we're doing in Serbia. Another element of this is also developing impact investing education here as well at the Russian Rural Innovation Institute and Center in the village of Zlakusa. So from here, I teach a lot of fellowships and programs on impact investing and regenerative investing, which has become more of a mainstream term now when you look at regenerative economy as a principle and how to develop, the future of our global economy in the midst of a crisis and post-COVID crisis as well. And what we'd like to do as part of that is partner with educational institutions, research bodies. For example, what we've been able to do in terms of partnerships with Israel is partner with researchers who are developing new solutions for hempcrete. So taking hemp fiber and utilizing it for innovative and sustainable building. So we're really excited about that. It's a partnership that is in the works with the Ben-Gurion University. And we hope to also partner with more universities and educational institutions in Israel, particularly for two reasons. So one, to scale Israeli technology for positive social and environmental impact. And that will also be facilitated by the fact that Serbia and Israel have very strong economic and technological cooperation, and many bilateral agreements were signed in the recent in our recent history. So we're looking forward to developing that further and really facilitating active collaboration between Israeli and Serbian entities, entrepreneurs, and stakeholders from a wide range of sectors. And with that being said, on the facilitation side, Raphael Bitterman manages Russian Ventures in Israel when it comes to our incubation, acceleration, and direct investing initiatives, as well as when it comes to scaling Israeli technology outside of Israel, and also scaling programs from Serbia and other parts of the world that we're involved with to Israel, particularly from the standpoint of regenerative agriculture. So I'll let him take it from here and talk a little bit more about our work there in Israel.
So hi everyone, thank you for joining and thank you for coming. This is really exciting to be able to organize our first Regenerative Economy Summit. As Miriam said, thank you very much for the introduction. The Russian Ventures in Israel, the focus is actually, as you mentioned before, to scale Israeli technology outside of Israel. And with, of course, with specifically in terms of, impacts technology. What we've realized in Israel over the last couple of months is there's a great, tech community, obviously, as the star of nation being, Israel, but, there's so much more potential in terms of being the impact nation, and which, this is the name of the panel that we all, came together. And unfortunately, what we've realized is that, with this amazing technology, sometimes, little tweaks here and there could make such a difference for the companies in Israel and for the world. I mean, obviously every company makes an impact, but at the moment we've experienced that, in Israel, companies are not yet positioning themselves as an, impact companies. So this is, I think, our role for, our mission here in Israel is to work together with everyone. And at the same time, we have to, I think the most important part is education. Education of the professionals in the VC world, education for the entrepreneurs, which is there's a lot of work still to do. And I think, if we all work together, because I think at the moment it's time for all different people, organizations in the world to still work together, because there's a lot of work still to do. So we took a mission on Russian Ventures and the Russian group to be part of that. Another point I want to mention is the notion of impact measurement. At the moment in Israel, we are still lacking the measurements of impact, even by the so-called impact investment and impact companies. So this is very important, I think, and we can be inspired by, I think, the Ben and Jerry story, their supply chain and being a B Corp. I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from this company of being successful as an impact company. Here in Israel, what we have realized is that companies still go the traditional route, because we as Israelis, we have no patience. So we just want to go quick, IPO, and it's generally, in terms of the financing, it's going to be traditional finance, private equity finance. Impact finance and the financial models that, we have implemented and we are in the midst of launching an outcomes fund is a different and innovative finance model. And I think here, which connects again to what I just said before, it's in terms of education. I mean, that's the key here. If we can educate the VCs, the investment houses, I think, Israel as a startup nation can become an impact nation. So, in terms of Russian Ventures, the Russian group, we still, Miriam touched the notion of, or the vision of the foundation. We have Russian here as an accelerator that we've been very proud and been, working with a few companies, which already we see the positive outcomes, and by pivoting themselves as an impact company. So there is an actual case study who has been really successful. So we're very proud of that during the COVID crisis. And lastly, we have another division, which is the communications and the media division as well. Sorry, also our consulting division, which generally helps companies that want to get into the space of impact, and we help them with the measurement and setting them up in the right way. So that's very much Russia. As my professional background, I'm an IP lawyer, but I've been building platforms for the last 20 years in the diamond and the cannabis industry, and now I'm very happy to build our platforms here at Russia, because we've been actively building different platforms. And hope you have a great summit. We can all learn from each other, and glad to be here. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Chen Shmilo. I'm the Managing Director of 8200 Impact. We're an acceleration program affiliated with 8200 Alumni Association. 8200 Impact is focused on harnessing the human capital of 800 alumni for the sake of social technological startups. We have a 5-month intensive program with studying, mentoring, a physical space to enjoy, and obviously a demo day at the end. And we focus on entrepreneurs that are seeking to solve either social or environmental, significant social or environmental issues with technological means. I'm an A200 veteran, of course, and also worked for the Israeli Prime Minister office. But I studied law, and as soon as I finished my first degree, I did my internship in a big law firm here in Tel Aviv, Israel. Right after that, I became a legislative aide at the Knesset for a while, and then I got accepted to be the public policy director of the Israeli Medical Association, where I was very active with lobbying, representing the Israeli physician at the Knesset committees. I already initiated the Israeli Public Health Forum within the Israeli Medical Association, and also was one of the co-founders of the LGBTQ Medical Society within the Medical Association. Then I had the privilege to be a Hubert H. Humphrey Fellow, which is a Fulbright program in the US in the field of public health policy and management. When I returned to Israel, I became the CEO of Israel AIDS HIV Task Force. And a few months ago, I stepped in this current position of being the managing director of A200 Impact.
My name is Rachel. I work for a good company. We are a VC, early stage VC. We are purpose-driven investors, investing in pre-seed and seed companies that are software-centric. Mainly, I wouldn't say mainly, but we have verticals of investment around the UN SDGs, obviously. We've made already 3 pre-seed investments in healthcare, reverse logistics, shared amenities, and agriculture. Some have 2 SDGs, as I'm sure you all know. We're always looking for the 3 Ps, the right people, the right purpose, and the right potential. We never compromise on the bottom line. We think the best returns for our investors are those companies doing good. That's the future. That's how we see it. We don't differ ourselves from any other investors. We think we're all the same investors, but we choose to put our focus on the companies that are going to change the world because they will generate the highest returns. About me, I'm a mom of a 3-year-old daughter, and I have another one on the way, not as early as Miriam, but end of October. That's it. Our fund, as I mentioned before, will be investing in mainly pre-seed and seed rounds of software-centric companies. They have to be software. We're looking for, first and foremost, good people to invest in that have an idea that is a potential billion-dollar company that would make the world a better place and improve some kind of, it's hard to say specific field because it could be anything from healthcare to energy or agriculture. We're not limiting ourselves. But it does have to be innovative and obviously have the right potential. And what we're really interested is really being hands-on with the startups alongside our network of good companies, which include multinationals, other VCs that we're planning on doing investing with them. And companies that we invested in, portfolio companies, and companies that we haven't decided whether we will or not invest in. We call it the Good Company Network. That name might change. But creating an ecosystem for those entrepreneurs who are really looking to change the world, and the multinationals that have challenges in their companies that they want to solve, obviously relating purpose-driven challenges. And they're looking for Israeli startups that they want to use, and we might invest in those companies. It's a really process we're doing as a value-added services for partners and for companies. For the multinationals, it will be a sprint, identifying the challenges, creating an event around it to find the right company that could be a good fit for them, and then collaborating with the company, with the startup and the multinational to see if that really solves the multinational's problem.
I can relate to many things that were said here, but what Rachel described is kind of her mirror image of what we're trying to do and how we are trying to educate our portfolio companies, and especially the current cohort that we just kicked off last week. So this time we had 180 applicants. They all applied to the 200 Impact program, knowing that we are focused on impact tech ventures. Out of the 180 companies, we screened them all, and I would elaborate a little bit more about the screening process. But out of 180, we invited for an interview 30 of them, and out of 30, only 10 ventures were accepted to be participating in the current batch. So when we're looking on selecting the right companies for us, we look at the criteria of first whether they have the intentionality to be impact tech companies, and this criteria is tested usually by whether they formally declare that their core intention when coming up with the idea and forming the company was to either solve or find a solution to a significant social or environmental problem. Second question that we ask is whether they have a measurable social or environmental impact. And we usually use the SDGs as the leading criteria to identify it. And the third question is a similar one to, I guess, all other acceleration programs, is whether they can make money. Simple as that. We're looking at their financial potential revenues and see if they can be actually a startup company just as all other startup successful startup companies. And this double line or triple line thing is what we're looking in our companies. And so we've come up with, or we selected this time 10 ventures in different domains, agriculture, agri-tech, ed tech. This time we focused on also fighting domestic violence with technological means and protecting women in public spaces. So we have 3 ventures that are focused on this issue. And just like in any other year, in cooperation with Bank Hapoalim, we have an accessibility track in which at least 3 ventures each year participate as they're trying to develop solutions to better accessibility in different domains for people who are living with disabilities. And that's about it.
The UN just launched an initiative this year to integrate business and human rights. So, on the macro level, this is like, this is like a no-brainer, I would say. This is like the first step. The main pain point, and funny enough, you mentioned, I was on a webinar last week with Oni Patent Power, and somebody asked a question, are there any impact benchmarks? And the answer of Oni was like, you want to jog and we can barely walk. So So that's, I think, the critical issue at the moment in general in impact investment is, the impact measurement. And when we look at companies, we actually already putting, our impact, glasses and watch the company in different aspects. How does it affect the community? How do they work with their suppliers, the producers? Have they put any mechanisms to place to, we discussed human rights, which is very important before in terms of violence, which, it's very important also to look at that. And are they supporting, the people that realize their potential? That's the crucial questions that we look. And we at Rosham, we undertook to, build such a tool to be available for, the business community, hopefully in the next coming months. And then it's going to make impact investment much more easier, because you will have already data upfront on a company which is available already. And in the future, I think every company will have to have an impact data. I mean, I've said it before, impact investment at the moment is quite a new notion. But in the future, only impact investment will be investment. And we see it already now, like, the financial markets, who's outperforming who. So, ESG funds are outperforming any other funds. And I think that's the way to do it. So I think we just, have to position ourselves where we are at best, Israel, and with our Jewish values, I think, we can become really the impact nation. And I strongly believe that. So thank you.
Some of our ventures are focused on, I would say, very irregular markets, because, many Israeli startups, I would say the vast majority are looking to scale up to the American or either the European market. But in our cohort this year, we have one technological ventures that is actually focused on Latin America. There's another one who's focused on farmers in Kenya. One of our really outstanding champions from previous batches is Kehila, who works with TB patients in Africa in several states. Now they're expanding to more states and also focusing on HIV. So I would say that from the very beginning, we want to support ventures that are not only focusing on expanding or scaling up to either the US or Europe, but also to other markets. But we have to facilitate it. And I would say that as an acceleration program, it is quite a big challenge for us to help them, make the right connections in those markets. Sometimes we address the government or chambers of commerce to help us, find the right connections for that. But on a more general level, actually, we had a closed discussion yesterday with Chemi Peres, the head of Pitango, one of the biggest and most famous VCs here in Israel. He happens to be the son of the former president and prime minister, Shimon Peres, rest in peace. And he noted that the world is changing now in a way that lack of resources is no longer a big issue, because technology and innovation, when it is implemented in the right way, can solve many problems. So look at Israel. We don't have many water resources, but currently it's not a huge issue as it used to be before, because we came up with technologies that can produce water in different ways. I guess it's the same trick for agriculture, electricity, other infrastructure. But you have to be open to new technologies and create the infrastructure for entrepreneurship. Now that also brings about the need for people to communicate with people, sometimes through a government. Sometimes the government can be key players in this game. Sometimes all they need to do is not to interrupt, and then people can help people. So Israeli entrepreneurs with the right business model don't really need both governments, for example, in Israel and South Africa, to implement Israeli technology for the sake of South African communities. What we do need is more knowledge and more communication so we can burst into new markets and do it in the right way.
And I just want to start with mentioning that from the perspective of scaling impact, that it really is about facilitating communication between stakeholders on the ground. So we don't need to go through governmental or corporate channels. We can go to the stakeholders directly and find out what they need. And that can include approaches to collecting data through lean mechanisms, through simply just going to talk to community representatives directly, as opposed to relying on third-party information, making sure that the data that we utilize is actually stakeholder verified. So how do we get to that point? We have to identify our stakeholders first. So we need to know, we need to have systems in place, stakeholder mapping and stakeholder engagement plans in place, and then simply go out and speak to them and include them, bring stakeholders onto our boards, set up stakeholder feedback initiatives, and make sure that when we look at impact-related data reporting, that it's actually verified that it actually did happen by the people who are the claimed beneficiaries of those positive impacts. And I also like to stay away from the description of calling individuals and communities just beneficiaries. So maybe we can look at it from that broader reporting perspective of outlining who our beneficiaries are. But we need to make space for stakeholders to communicate impact and outcomes of that impact in their own way. So that's where I'd like to start. And then when it comes to that communication, so the reason that we function the way we do at Roshem out of Israel is particularly to centralize communication so that we can have one consistent, coherent message coming out of Israel in terms of how Roshem Ventures manages the integration of impact and financial performance across its own work and portfolio. So our portfolio overall is managed from Israel, and that's where we set the standards on the types of positive impacts that we want to be making and the types of outcomes that we want to achieve internally. And that's also where we set our impact strategy and develop the thesis and theories of change around the different funds that we then establish in different parts of the world. So how that ties into due diligence. So the standardization is very centralized in terms of our standards being developed as well. And we use third-party tools like the B Impact assessment when assessing companies that come into our acceleration programs, or even when assessing our clients. So Roshem Impact as a consultancy also utilizes B Impact assessment and other types of vetting tools before determining whether or not to take on a client. And that's a start, because there's this huge missing element of impact financial integration, because we don't want to just be assessing impact. And oftentimes that's simply because by the time we get to the point where impact claims are actually verified by a third party, we end up losing a year in our due diligence process. So we can't wait for a company to become B Corporation certified and go through the B Corp verification process before we decide whether or not to invest. So we need to have tools in place and mechanisms that integrate impact with assessing potential financial performance and financial results, and that also provide a mechanism for stakeholder verification. So that's a huge challenge to tackle, because now we're looking at a 3-level integration: impact, claims, right? So the impact reporting that's self-reported by companies and investees. We're looking at stakeholder verification, so communicating with stakeholders to engage them with verifying impact. And we're looking at integrating both with financial performance. I think it's doable. I think it can happen, and we're working on making it happen. So we're starting with an introductory working group, and we're bringing together our partners, our stakeholders, and our clients to be a part of that working group, so that we can create tools
for the achievement of impact financial integration. And that, I think, is what's crucial for impact scaling. So if we want to talk about scaling high potential technologies and high potential companies and innovation that can change the world, we need to be able to scale and scale fast. And the only way that can happen is integrating technology into the due diligence process as well. So we can go through due diligence a lot faster, close our deals a lot faster, and manage both the impact and the financial performance of those investments as part of our strategy, as part of how we work as fund managers. And there's also the element of capacity building. So what we do at Rusham is we have an in-house capacity building team. So the media side of things and the impact consulting side of things is also very much integrated with how we support our investees, so that a lot of the capacity building can be done in-house by separate teams, so that the general partner doesn't have to be hands-on with building capacity at the investee company, or that the fund management team doesn't have to be hands-on, but that there's a partnership in place with an affiliated company. And that also comes into due diligence as well, because when you're looking at impact investing, you need to have a capacity building partner. You need to have that support. According to Gen Statistics, 73% of impact investors provide capacity building support to some extent, and very rarely in-house, usually with development finance institutions. And so there's another element of due diligence there, is how long does it take to find those capacity building partners, and what types of due diligence processes are involved, was making sure that we have the right partners on the ground. So when it comes to investing in Africa from Israel, investing into any other emerging market from a more developed country, we need to have local partners, especially on the capacity building side. And that process of establishing those local partnerships needs to happen a lot faster and a lot more effectively too. Because at the end of the day, we're running out of time. We don't have a lot of time left to fix some of our most crucial social and environmental problems. And tying into what Raphael said from the spiritual standpoint, the notion of tikkun olam, healing the world, and the very notion, when you look at things from a spiritual perspective, that I think everyone can relate to, regardless of their religious beliefs, is our understanding of the spiritual significance of Israel is that as a people, as a nation of the Jewish people, regardless of whether or not you're religious or where you ended up, where your family lived throughout the years in the diaspora, our foundational belief is the notion of being here to make the world a better place and to fix the problems that we see, to create solutions. So on that note, that's how I see Israel being the impact nation, is that we are a nation of people who create solutions. And the more we can collaborate, the more we can work together, the faster and quicker we can scale positive impact, both from a financial standpoint and from a standpoint of ensuring that the social and environmental impact that we claim to be making is actually real and verified. So thank you.
Just before you go though, I just wanna, have your thoughts around, you've touched on two key points that have really resonated with me regarding not looking for the government to facilitate, but instead for us that we go in and do the groundwork ourselves with regards to data collection and verification. And those are really sound ideas. Can you just talk to us around your ideas with stakeholder inclusion? I find that more often than not, we want to prioritize the directors and the investors and. Can you just give us, a Rosham kind of solution regarding or stakeholder inclusion?
So there are formal mechanisms. So when we're looking at establishing stakeholder boards, that is a collaborative process. So we'd be looking to the board of directors of the company to mandate the company to establish stakeholder engagement initiatives and create stakeholder boards, whereby through formal mechanisms and processes, the company's identified stakeholders, suppliers, employees, community members, community organizations would then come in and sit on formal boards, advise the company on its governance and on its policies, procedures, and practices. And then that advice comes back to the executive board, and there's this atmosphere of collaboration and of creating win-win outcomes. That's ultimately what we want, is we want to facilitate through formal channels, setting up these types of structures, so that instead of, everyone having their own idea of what stakeholder engagement means and having to, figure out how do we do this, how do we engage the community, that it's very formal. And that, community organizations and representatives are formally invited to participate in these processes. And then there's also the element, with publicly traded companies as well, that they can implement these types of initiatives. Is the element of, shareholder advocacy, whereby, companies like Change Finance have launched initiatives to actively start engaging shareholders at publicly traded companies to attend meetings and speak up about the issues that they care about. So that's also stakeholder engagement, because shareholders are stakeholders as well, right? So we have to create this ecosystem of active collaboration between all stakeholders. So just to build on what we've shared so far, Rachel, can you share a bit about Good Company's due diligence process, where you're at now, where you want to be, and how you view due diligence when it comes to your investment approach?
Yeah, sure. So Good Company is right now, as I mentioned, raising our fund. We have already we're getting to the first closing very soon. And our first fund is mainly, our investment thesis is syndicate first, meaning we want to do rounds with experienced VCs in specific fields. We feel like this is a really good way for us to build our reputation. And we believe in sharing deal flow. So we speak with VCs all the time. Also knowing the trends from the multinationals that we conduct the challenges with is a good way to know which companies we're looking for. So it's two things happening in parallel. We're still dealing with our deal flow and having companies and looking at them. And I speak to 10 new companies a week, something like that. Because as Chen, I'm sure knows, there's a big void in purpose-driven investments, especially in early rounds in Israel. So it's a really good opportunity for us, and it's a good timing. COVID-19 has only done us well, both for deal flow and for LPs, because people just have time to Zoom, which they never had before. Face-to-face meeting is, I wouldn't exchange that for anything, but it did make us more efficient time-wise. So we get to meet more people and conduct more conversations with investors and startups. So it's a really interesting time. And of course, I think the COVID-19 also presented an opportunity for startups in the field, especially digital healthcare, but not only, but that want to solve issues that now people have noticed, finally. Global warming, agriculture, people are staying home, they need food. And so what's going on with, for example, one of our startups is BeHero. They deal with smart hives. They want to stop, we want to help stop bees from dying. So, so we see a huge potential right now. They already, I think, did 4 times on their projections just this year alone. It's overwhelming. And Tulu, another portfolio company who do shared amenities. People are staying home. They need more to use more, I don't know, the vacuum, the printer, stuff like that. And they don't want to really spend money. So shared amenities is also a good way for them to help the world and help their pockets. So they're also being really successful. And as for the fund, where it's going, this is the first one. So we plan to do more and more. Hopefully, like I want to say in 10 years, we'll have at least 3 funds. We believe that startups that want to change the world can make 20 times on their money, because that's the future. That's where people want to see their money go, to doing good.